Welcome to Milestone Moments, the show where we explore the journeys that lead to success. I'm Sheila Slick, your host and founder of 5 Milestones. In every episode, we will bring you insights from the minds of entrepreneurs, leaders, and experts who will share not just their expertise, but the milestone moments that have reshaped their journeys and led to significant achievements. So if you're looking for motivation, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and discover the milestones that mark the path to success. Welcome to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. I'm Sheila Slick, your host, and today my special guest is Allison Bowen. Allison is a real estate investor and life coach based in Tennessee. She is dedicated to empowering women through mentorship and encouragement. Allison Bowen is a positive intelligence coach who helps people unlock their potential by mastering the mental habits that lead up to greater clarity, focus, and success. Welcome back, Allison.
Thank you so much for that introduction and for having me here again to continue our conversations. They have been so rich, and I'm looking forward to the listeners' feedback about what's really hitting them and what they value and what they want to hear more about.
So, with that in mind, why don't we talk about that power of connection? How, when you're either in a crossroads, in a transition, or in a major life change, how finding like minded people, finding support in community, and having those connections is beneficial, is so important.
It's essential because I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with the thought leader Jim Rohn, but he says you are only as good as the average of the 5 people you spend time with. And why is that? And that is because the way that people around you think impacts you. And the work that I do with my clients with the positive intelligence framework, there are mirror neurons, and our positivity and our positive intelligence can impact others, but we also have to be aware of the fact that others can impact us. So just beginning to recognize, I know when I have stepped out into new opportunities, sometimes even my family hasn't been the best place for me to share some of those dreams because they had limiting beliefs and fears that they lived with. So it was much better for me to go and find a tribe of people who were successful, for example, in real estate investing. Because when I started learning about real estate investing 8 years ago, I knew nothing. I had bought one house in my life. I knew nothing about it. So it was really important for me to surround myself with people because they inspired me. They were mentors to me. They were examples of what was possible. And they also became people that I turned to when I started getting into the nitty-gritty of how to get there. Like, because you have a dream, but then you have the plan, the blueprint for getting there, right? We talked about that in a previous conversation. So building community is important. And I want to just comment for a moment because as someone who I would characterize as being an ambivert, which is I'm an extrovert, but I have an introvert leaning aspect to myself as well, because I love being around community, building community, being around people, but I do get tired as well because it takes energy. Community is important not only for extroverts, but for people who are introverts. So I just want to put that thought out there and encourage those of you who are introverts who are like, oh, I don't want to have to go to a meetup or a networking group and shake hands. Those things I know can be super scary for all of us, but particularly so for introverts. But the value that they have in store for you is really priceless.
What was that term? Because I'm very extroverted, and this is probably where my computer and coding focus. I love math, right? So I call it my own internal geek, but I love it.
Ambivert. It's just kind of being like ambidextrous, where you can use your right and left hand. Well, ambivert is someone who has both qualities of introversion and extroversion.
I completely agree with you. So maybe we can talk about the differences in some of these groups because I see them out there. In my case, I do believe in the power of community. We had talked about how I had learned how to code, and it was really hard. And it was like if I could just, have someone that could help me answer some of these questions. And I had no choice but to start looking for groups and other developers. Fast forward when I ended up back in Florida and I did complete that master's degree, I looked up and I was like, oh my gosh, I've been going to school. I've been a mom. I've been relocating, restarting the house. I didn't have to build it from scratch. You know what it means to have to move your entire home and pack and unpack. Before I knew it, about 3 years of my life had passed since I had transitioned. And during that self awareness, I was like, it's time for me to look for a like minded community. And I started researching, and that's how I found SCORE. And for those people that don't know what SCORE is, it is a national nonprofit organization of about 11,000 mentors nationwide. SCORE is a partner of the SBA, and they help people looking to start or grow their business. And I thought maybe I'll meet other people interested in business, and at the same time, I'll find support.
Yeah, building that team for your business, it's just like in real estate investing because investing is not in Nashville is not the same as investing in Michigan. And if I live in Tennessee and invest in Nashville, but I live in Tennessee and invest in Michigan, I'm going to need different support communities and a CPA or an attorney, a real estate agent potentially, lenders. So in any area of business that you're in, you're right. You're going to need different communities that you're going to want to be a part of to support your businesses. So that is something that is amazing because so many times if we walk into a networking situation like me, for example, when I joined my local RIA, it's called the Real Estate Investor Association 8 years ago, I walked into the room and it was primarily men. There weren't a lot of women in the room. And that can be scary. Number one, as someone who knew nothing about real estate investing, someone who had just moved to Tennessee. So I had no friends here. I was just building my network of friends even. And even like doctors and dentists, I was building all the networks, rebuilding them all over again. But so if we let those things stop us, then we won't get to realize the value and the benefit of being in that room. So my tip to the listeners, get okay with being uncomfortable. Get okay with being the dumbest person in the room, maybe, because that means you're in the right room. It doesn't mean you're dumb. One of the things that I used to do in the early days, people would use terminology. So every business has kind of its own set of terminology, right, that defines it. And there were all these terms that I had no idea what they meant. So I would sit there and my notes would be, I would write down these terms and I would vow to myself to research these terms or reach, and I would also get phone numbers of people in the room. And I would reach out to people and say, hey, would you mind taking a minute and explaining what does this mean? And that can be very difficult because it's very humbling to acknowledge you don't know something. But it invites people to serve you in a way. So many people that are entrepreneurs, that are solopreneurs, that are business owners, they love pouring into others. They typically have a heart to serve themselves. And so when you let them know that you're new, you are hungry to learn, they are usually more than willing to take a few minutes and help you understand a concept. And I did that I still do that because I'm still putting myself in rooms where I don't know it all. Because when you begin to learn something, I'm sure you've realized this, Sheila, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
It's all about continuous learning. That's how you stay relevant and continue outside of that comfort zone. But I agree, and I did join SCORE only to then serve as the actual chapter chair for the 2 counties. I was one of the youngest members, but I bonded so much with the mentors. it was so rewarding to be able to lead them during that year. It was almost like a full-time position. I felt it many times, but I've met some of my new besties, and what I loved about them is they were all, with a similar mission, and it was how can we help others with their business. With my tech skills, it came in really handy, especially with a lot of the retirees or baby boomers that needed that side gig, either so that they're not bored or they needed it for extra income, and they didn't know how to navigate, social media. And I would have never known. You just think everyone knows how to use, social media.
Our age and older, a lot of us are still figuring it all out.
But when I did this podcast and I heard myself and I felt like imposter syndrome was hitting me all over again. And so I was like, no, I know what I got to do. So I joined Toastmasters.
I did too. Just this past year. Yes, just this past year I joined Toastmasters.
So we're going to start counting ums and filler words.
I remember the first TikTok live I did. It wasn't ums and filler words, but it was my throat clearing. It just blew me away. It's so challenging when you first step into these spaces and outside of your comfort zone to start sharing yourself with, the world. And then you listen and you begin to see things that you never realized that you did. And I was like, okay, that has to go. So it was great. It's always so humbling and a little embarrassing to see those things, but that's how we grow. One of my mentors used to tell me, if you're not embarrassed by the first time, the way that you did something for the first time, then you didn't step out of your comfort zone enough. Think about riding a bicycle. When we started learning how to ride a bicycle, when we were 4 or 5 or 10, however old you were, we were a little wobbly in the beginning, but it was only through doing it over and over again and skin to knees and sometimes falling down and crying that we mastered that skill. And so are all these other skills that we're talking about here today. So I love it. So you joined SCORE, you joined Toastmasters. I can't wait to explore and learn more about SCORE here in Middle Tennessee. And I'm inspired to do that because of knowing you. So this is a beautiful example of how networking expands your awareness. And because I'd heard of SCORE before, through meeting you, it's brought it back to the forefront of my awareness. And you've served in the community. And so I'm looking at that as maybe a sign that this is the time for me to explore a little bit more about SCORE. No rhyming intended.
Well, lucky for you. You don't even have to leave your house. Feel free to visit score.org, put in your zip code, and ask for a mentor. The mentors can work with you via Zoom. Now, each chapter is different, but I think they all work, via Zoom or in person a lot of times. Remember, they're volunteers. It's a volunteer organization, so in person may require an appointment. So it's a great resource out there.
I can't wait to learn more. So I hope our listeners take advantage of that as well. And that, kind of leads us into other examples of community, because we've talked about networking, we've talked about a couple of organizations to join and serve in. Other types of community, I've talked about the Real Estate Investor Association. So if you're interested in real estate investing, finding the Real Estate Investing Association in your area and join that, because you will find other people with similar interests. So what are some of the other types of community that we want to highlight here, Sheila?
All industries have associations, even if you want to become a public speaker. Yeah, like the Speakers Association. At the local level, you have the Chambers of Commerce. I know that there's online groups. We have masterminds, accountability groups, and I'd love to learn more from you. What do these groups look like?
So I can tell you what my groups look like only, really. So I started accountability prior to COVID, but I decided to do it virtually, even before COVID brought us all into this new virtual world. And the reason I did was because it makes it more accessible for more people. And frankly, it was easier for me. I didn't have to find a space. All I had to do was schedule a time and then invite people to show up. So we meet via Zoom twice a month, and I have a simple Google Sheet where you record your goals, and then we break it down into, you could call them milestones or next steps, minimum next steps. And we meet twice a month, and it's a very structured meeting. And let me clarify, when I first started the accountability groups, I was an accountability group member. So I was facilitating the meeting and I was a member. I soon realized that I didn't get the most benefit out of it as myself, and I wasn't offering the most value as the facilitator. So at this point, I have my own accountability group where I go to get support and encouragement and challenged. And in my groups, I just facilitate. So if you, Sheila, were to be a client, you would show up to our meeting and we would each have 10 to you would each have 10 to 15 minutes to talk about your highs and your lows since we last met. What are the things you want to celebrate and what are the challenges that you faced? And then you would go through each of your milestones and you would report out quickly on, did I accomplish this? Did I not accomplish this? If not, why not? And I'm telling you, if you've never experienced accountability in a supportive environment. Now, sometimes I say that word and people cringe and they're like, oh, I don't want to be
Using all these words that may scare people looking for some kind of structure.
right. So it's very structured. Number one, because I want to make the best use of the time that we have together. And also, depending on the size of the group, it goes by very quickly. I max my groups out at 6 people. I won't accept any more in a particular group. I start a new group if I have more interest. Men and women are both invited to be part of the group. I am not a subject matter expert in any other area other than real estate investing, which is where my accountability group started. But I will work with anybody who has goals that they're working towards. Now, I am not going to be able to advise you, for example, on your business and leadership, but I have life experience that the questions I ask you might support you to head in a direction if you're facing challenges. So that's the accountability group structure, arrive on time, report out, celebrate highs, share your lows. And that community that you build is so powerful. Number one, because I only allow people to encourage each other. So we are there to support each other and moving the needle forward and overcoming challenges and seeing things that, sometimes when you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, you're so close to the problem, you just can't see the opportunities that are right there in front of you or know the right questions to ask. So it's amazing how community changes your experience. Some people recommend accountability partners, and more often than not, I've seen those fail because it's very difficult when one person starts to waver. And sometimes that happens, maybe there's a death in the family or there's an illness and they're unable to continue showing up, or maybe they just aren't comfortable pushing the other person. So I find those dyads not to be the most effective. Now, if you create that with someone, that's beautiful. But that's why I decided to create the group and to facilitate that, because I build, what did that movie, Build It and They Will Come. I build the space and then invite my clients into it. And they get to enjoy the benefit of that. And the value it brings to their lives is amazing. I mean, people make more money being held accountable. So is that kind of clarify a little bit about?
Oh, voila. Yes, you give me a behind the scenes. Thank you, Allison. Now, where my experience lies is in programs, right, that have a beginning and an end. So, for example, I've done the entrepreneurial mindset program, and we've done it in 10 weeks. But then once the program ends, you have that option to just stay on one-on-one coaching. Like, I still want you to keep me coaching or advising, so to speak, but to actually have a group like that is really interesting. And it's similar to a mastermind. The difference with a mastermind, if I'm not mistaken, is a mastermind is when you've got different experts and they're coming together so that they share resources, opinions.
For me, I grew my accountability groups into masterminds because all of us are experts. We might not be a subject matter expert, but I have a client who's in her 70s, and you can imagine the amount of life experience this woman has, right? So a mastermind invites people in the group to go around and talk about a little bit more in depth about the challenges they're facing and what kind of support they need. And the people in the accountability group mastermind get an opportunity to ask them questions to clarify what the challenge is and help them to see their blocks and also make recommendations about how to reframe something. You and I have used that term in our conversations in other episodes. And, there might be a limiting belief that's there that they uncover, and someone might have an alternative way of believing that they can begin to help the client see. It might just be, have you called this bank, or are you aware of SCORE being available? So a mastermind is just a collection of minds that come together because I'm limited by what I know. And if it's just me trying to think through and solving my problems and challenges, I just don't have access to all the information that could be available if I partner with others and give them, first of all, a chance to see me a little bit more vulnerably. So these groups are confidential. People have to make an agreement that they're not going to share the information that is shared because people talk about vulnerable things when people are talking about their businesses and they're talking about their P&Ls and their gross profits and net profits. Sometimes those numbers are very private and they don't want that information shared. So there's a level of confidentiality and a level of safety. You would be amazed at the number of times that a challenge that an entrepreneur might be facing might be showing up in their business, but it might be because they have an ailing parent that they're having to care for and they're concerned about, right? So there's these other things that get mentioned sometimes, and that they can get support by being in a mastermind.
Just to kind of go over all the different things or the different communities, you've got masterminds, which you just described. There's accountability groups. We talked about peer mentorship when we brought in SCORE. We talked about coaching programs in the sense that they're structured and they normally come with a community, which is a great way to meet other like-minded people too. And sometimes there's support after that, whether it be group coaching or individual coaching. And we didn't really talk much about workshops and webinars, but that's where we met. We clicked, we connected, and it's that easy to start getting out of that comfort zone, whether virtual or in person.
And I encourage people to experiment and explore the different ways of connecting with community and to expect that you're going to make some mistakes, right? You're going to join a webinar and you're going to be like, oh, you're going to get in there. You'll be like, no, this isn't for me.
So I think what you said, explore, be curious, and see what's best for you is right on point. I think the common thread, the suggestion is that you don't have to do it alone. You can surround yourself with people that are and they don't have to be similar minded either, because sometimes, that other perspective is really going to, give you feedback on how you can improve. So it's not like, oh, you have to all think the same way. They can challenge you. They can inspire you. They can share resources. And then you can see how far you can go.
Yes, actually, a lot of times it's really good to be around people as long as we share a common set of values. There has to be alignment in our values, but it's really through interacting with people of different beliefs and different experience levels and different levels of knowledge that we all grow. So those differences are really, really helpful, and it helps us to grow if it challenges us when they're there.
Well, thank you again for your time today, Allison. Thank you for joining me, and thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in today.
Thank you so much, Sheila. It was great to be here again. I enjoy our conversation.